Okay, so usually we do have a video. Muito bem-vindos a todos e todas. Eu vou conversar com a nossa convidada de hoje, que é a Orly Erez-Likhovski. Ela é diretora executiva do Israel Religious Action Center, ou Centro de Ação Religiosa. Vai ser uma entrevista excepcionalmente em inglês, por isso eu estava conversando com ela em inglês, logo que a gente foi plugada, eu estava esperando aquele videozinho que normalmente antecede aí os nossos programas. Então, mais uma vez, bem-vindos e bem-vindas. Uma rápida introdução sobre ela. Ela é formada em Direito pela Universidade de Tel Aviv, ela atuou como assistente jurídica na Suprema Corte de Israel, depois estudou em Colômbia, e é integrante das Ordens dos Advogados de Israel de Nova York, faz um monte de coisa e está lá no IRAC, ou Centro de Ação Religiosa de Israel, que é um braço do movimento reformista desde 2004, há mais de 20 anos, portanto, so good to have you, Orly. Em tempo, essa entrevista vai ser em inglês, como eu disse, depois a gente vai legendar, então pode ser que você já esteja assistindo a versão gravada e legendada, então você vai ter aí as legendas, mas se você está aqui ao vivo com a gente, você acompanha, por favor, em inglês conosco. Orly, it's really a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So to begin our conversation, I'd like to go back to what happened in Ra'anana on the eve of Yom HaZikaron, just 2 weeks ago. You went through deeply painful, troubling moments. Could you walk us through what happened and how you experienced it?
Yeah, so on the eve of Memorial Day, there was a screening of the joint Israeli-Palestinian ceremony that has been going on for decades now. This ceremony is initiated by bereaved families, both Israeli and Palestinian, that want to talk about how we stop the pain and how we stop the cycle of violence and actually strive for peace. And try to end the wars that bring so much pain to this area. And this has been a ceremony that unfortunately has a lot of opposition. And over the years, there has been a lot of protests. And in the last few years, the ceremony itself, the live ceremony, is happening in an undisclosed location. So only the people who are invited know about this. And so the protesters cannot protest there because they don't know where it's happening. And there are screening of the ceremony in many places across the country. One of the places that it was screened was in the Reform congregation in Ra'anana. And for some reason, all of the opposition to the ceremony was centered around this location. I usually, in the last few years, watch the ceremony at home on my computer, but I work at the Israel Religious Action Center of the Reform Movement. And when we started hearing that there's going to be a lot of protests against the ceremony, I decided to go there and support the congregation and help there as much as I can. I arrived there a little early, and at the beginning there were starting to gather a few protesters. At first, they did not let us enter the building, and then the police said, okay, you can enter the building, the people who came for the screening, and the others are going to stay outside, the protesters. There was not enough police force there. We asked for more, additional police force, and they, sent more and more policemen because more and more protesters gathered, and quite quickly we saw a huge mob, violent mob, chanting racist slurs against Arabs, against us, trying to disrupt the screening of the ceremony. So we were inside the synagogue, but we had people screaming outside, banging on the doors, trying to enter from the side entrance. At one point, they did somehow enter the synagogue, and police pushed them outside. They threw stones on the windows of the synagogue. So we did manage to see the ceremony in full, but it was very troubling, of course, because the experience was very scary. And the big challenge was how we're going to basically get everybody outside at the end of screening. So we were around 50 or 60 people. And by that time, there were hundreds of people outside the synagogues. And unfortunately, the police did not drive them away to the other side of the street, did not try to, they have a lot of mechanisms to, against protesters, which the police uses heavily against anti-governmental protests, every week in the middle of Tel Aviv, but they did not use those measures here. No water cannons, no horses, and they let the protesters stand right at the entrance of the synagogue. And so what they decided at the end, the police, is that we go out in small groups of 6 to 7 people, surrounded by policemen that were supposed to protect us from the mob. And people started going out. I stayed at the very last group with the rabbi of the congregation, Rabbi Chen Ben Ortzfoni, and 2 other people. We went outside, surrounded by policemen. By that time, so border control soldiers. It really felt like a war. They had, full gear. They had helmets, and they surrounded us, trying to help us go into our cars. It was very scary. We had people kicking us, spitting at us, throwing stones, cursing us, and we really went with our heads down in order to try to protect ourselves as much as we can. Finally, we got to my car. We all got into my car, and then the police had to help me to get out of the mob that kept surrounding me and kicking my car and keeping throwing stones. And at the end, we got somehow outside of the mob, and I finally started to breathe. And then out of nowhere, I felt a pain in my shoulder. A stone was thrown at my window shield while I was driving, and my window shattered to thousands of pieces of glass on me. And it was a complete shock because I thought that by then we were over the terrible experience. We had also motorcycles follow us, and we were scared. We called the police, and they drove them away. And I ended up, the evening ended at the ER, at the hospital. I went to be checked, and while my shoulder feels better now after 2 weeks, I'm still very shaken by this experience. And so were dozens of people who took part in this ceremony. I have to say that during my work, I've been present in many occasions of hatred and violence, but I have never experienced this amount of violence and hate. And it is shocking. And I think part of the problem is that there were many people there who actually physically attacked me and many others, but there were people who sent them. We have been witnessing a lot of incitement by people from this government, our current government, in the last 2.5 years, and an erosion of Israeli democracy. And the people who came to protest violently against the screening of the ceremony were not only against the ceremony, they were against freedom of expression, they were against our freedom to think and do whatever we want peacefully. And this is, of course, stands in contrast to the fundamental principles of democracy. You don't go about and beat people because they think differently. So it's really shows a major problem of Israeli society now.
Yeah, and what does this incident tell us about the stance of Likud, the Likud party, and the current conduct of Israeli law enforcement?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about the Likud, you're completely correct. The people who were part of the protesters, the violent protesters, they wore T-shirts of the Likud. So it was clear they are part of the ruling party, which now unfortunately has become an extreme right-wing party. It's like, the party of Meir Kahana, Rabbi Kahana, the racist party of years ago that, decades ago was considered to be on the fringes of Israeli political scene. All of the parties boycotted them because of their racist views. And now, unfortunately, they've moved to center stage. And these views, which are racist and extremist and so dangerous, have become normalized, especially by the Likud, by the current ruling party. And the fact that actually the head of the Likud in Ra'anana actually called on people to come and try to stop this event. And after this horrible violence, the next day she said, beware, we're going to have more events like that. So she did not, apologize or something, but actually justify the violence. So this is what we are standing up against. And I think a lot of liberal Israelis now understand what we are up against. A lot of Israelis here were shaken by this experience, including a lot of right-wing people who hold liberal views and say, of course, we're not about, supporting violence. And I think it made people understand that we, under this really, really extreme reality, in this extreme circumstances, we have to raise a voice. Because if you stay silent in the face of such violence, well, first, it's gonna, get to you at the end. And, it's really the basic principles of in the society we want to live in. And if we want to live in a democratic society, then we have to make sure this is not justified, but actually, we are against this.
What's your take on the reactions from opposition leaders? Did they meet your expectations or not?
So actually, the reactions were very disappointing. We are in a reality where we don't expect any condemnation by the coalition, right, by the government, which in and of itself is unbelievable, right? We don't expect them to condemn violence. Actually, Rabbi Gilad Kariv, member of Knesset of the Labour Party, who used to be the CEO of the Reform Movement, actually proposed a proposal on the Knesset plenary a few days later, asking the Knesset to condemn violence. And then a member of the government, the Minister of Communication, Shlomo Kari from the Likud, came to respond on behalf of the government and said, no, we, the Jews, are people like lions, and when people make us angry, then we bite them, then we, fight back. So actually justifying the violence, not only not condemning this. So this is our government, unbelievably enough. But the opposition was very disappointing. So we saw the head of the Democrats, Yair Golan, condemn it unequivocally, but the others were very hesitant. I can tell you that Yair Lapid, who is considered to be one of the leaders of the liberal camp, it took him a few days to post a post on Facebook, and then his post was not a total condemnation of violence. He started to sort of paint the picture of extremists on both sides. Now, trying to equate the people who attacked us and the people who were attacked is very dangerous, right? So we have to be very clear about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. So it was a very disappointing reaction. The party of Gantz, a centrist party that is also considered to be holding liberal values, the head of the party, Gantz, did not say anything. Only in a press conference a few days later, when he was asked, he condemned it, but he didn't initiate any condemnation of his own. A member of his party, Chili Trooper, a member of Knesset, did call me a few days later and posted a post on Facebook. But in general, it was very disappointing not to take a very clear stance that this is not something that should be allowed anywhere. The fact that we're seeing scenes of Jews attacking Jews on the eve of Memorial Day is mind-boggling. I mean, we have anti-Semitism all over the world, and we have synagogues being guarded from anti-Semitic threats and attacks. But to think that we have to guard our synagogue because of Jews trying to attack us, this is something that is unbelievable and should have been condemned very clearly by all, members of the opposition. Unfortunately, this was not the case.
Can you say there is a sort of normalization of racism, at least in part of the society and politics?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen a growing normalization. First of all, as I said, because the coalition has become very, very racist and extreme. The Likud used to be a right-wing liberal party. It used to hold the liberal values of equality, to believe in the independence of the courts and of the Supreme Court, to believe that all of us should be entitled protection of the law. And unfortunately, this is not the case in the last few years. I have to say that Netanyahu used to have liberal views. A decade ago, there was a video of him saying he is going to make sure the Supreme Court is independent because the democracy needs a strong Supreme Court. And since he is undergoing corruption charges, he completely changed. And under the current government 2.5 years ago, we have seen a radical shift toward the extreme right wing. That is really, really very troubling. And the fact that some centrist parties are not saying very clearly this is out of legitimate discourse, but rather trying to, include it in some kind of a normalized or legitimate political discourse. This in and of itself also really, brought it to the legitimate political arena. And we have to be very clear in saying that some views are not legitimate, okay? Holding liberal values does not mean that all is legitimate. No, it means that you have to believe in the very basic principles of democracy, which are equality and tolerance and pluralism and justice for all. And those who do not view it should be out of the political spectrum. I can tell you that we at Iraq asked in 2019 to disqualify racist candidates from running to the Knesset. Under Israeli law, you can ask to disqualify a person if he holds racist views. For many years, the Supreme Court did not disqualify any candidates because the court said we have to bring a lot of evidence to actually prove that someone is racist and to take from someone the very important right to be elected to the parliament. In 2019, we asked that the court disqualify 4 leaders of the racist Jewish Strength Party. 3 were indeed disqualified for the first time in 30 years. Those are Gopstein, Marzel, and Ben-Ari. Unfortunately, the 4th one that we asked to disqualify is Ben-Gvir, and he was not disqualified. I think it was a major mistake by the court because we see where we have come, right? In the last 2.5 years, his views, Ben-Gvir's views that used to be really considered illegitimate have become mainstream. And I think this is super dangerous. On the other hand, I have to say that as the situation becomes more and more dangerous, more people on the liberal camp understand we have to present our values and our agenda very clearly. And it causes people to understand we have to raise a voice, we cannot stay silent, and we have to literally stand up for the values we believe in. I think we've seen it in the pro-democracy protests of 2023, that many people who before were sort of the silent majority staying at home came out to the streets, marched with us, and physically stood up for the values they believed in. And it was a really, really important process that the Israeli liberal public has been going through. It obviously changed a lot since October 7th and the war, because a lot of people have now different priorities. But we must remember how important it is, especially since this government is continuing its assault on Israeli democracy, continuing to push the regime coup, the legal coup, and to try to pass very, very, very dangerous bills that are going to threaten really the rights of us all.
And how does the decline in the freedom of the press intertwine with this whole scenario? The reason I'm asking this is because this year, Israel reached its lowest position ever on the World Press Freedom Index by the NGO Reporters Without Borders, 112th place, a drop of 26 spots since 2022. So what's your vision about it?
Yeah, I think a lot of our rights are under attack in the last few years, and the freedom of the press is one important right or arena that has been restricted. The government has been, for many years trying to, in different ways, to restrict freedom of press. I mean, look at the fact that our prime minister did not give an interview to an Israeli channel other than the channel that very supports him, which is Channel 14, which is like, Fox News in America. For years, he just did not give answers, even after the terrible, terrible massacre of October 7th. Instead of actually standing up and allowing people to ask him questions, he's not willing to do it. And the government is doing a lot of things to try to restrict critical media outlets and, support media outlets that are supportive of the government. They're doing it in many, many ways. They're trying to push for bills that are going to, shut down problematic outlets for the government. And this is very dangerous. And I think we're seeing a growing divisiveness, a growing division within Israeli society, because some people get, their news from this one news channel that is very supportive of the government and is portraying a completely fake reality, spreading a lot of fake news. But it affects, of course, how people think, what are their opinions. And sometimes we feel there is no common ground for us to talk to some of our opponents because we can't agree on the facts, right? Because there is, spreading of fake news, and it's just not the reality. During the pro-democracy protests, it was really important for us and many other civil society organizations to tell Israelis what's at stake, what the government is trying to do, to explain to Israelis what is our legal system, what the fact that we don't have a lot of checks and balances, and the fact that the government is trying to crush down our judicial system. And so we had to at first let people understand what are the facts, because not everybody got the facts right. So I think the importance of free press is always critical, and especially now with the assaults on democracy, we must make sure that Israelis understand what's actually happening. And, despite the fact that the government is spreading, fake news all the time. I mean, look at now with, the hostages, the fact that most Israelis want a ceasefire, want to bring back the hostages, and the government and the prime minister keeps talking about, no, we have to reach a total victory and eradicate Hamas, and do not even talk or the hostages are like the last priority for the government, which is mind-blowing, and they're not even saying it out loud because they know it's against the opinion of most Israelis. So I think the fact that we still have, thank God, strong critical media outlets that tell Israelis what's actually at stake, that's showing Israelis what's happening in Gaza, the pain and suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, that some media outlets don't show it all. This is super important, especially now.
Mm-hmm. And what's your perspective on the way Eden Alexander was released, the negotiations directly between Americans and Hamas without the involvement of the Israeli government, and what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think a lot of people were shocked. The fact Zionism and the establishment of the State of Israel was in order for Jews to, take responsibility for our destiny, to be an independent country that takes care of the citizens, take care of be a safe haven for the Jewish people. And the fact that, first of all, the government deserted, the citizens deserted Israeli citizens who had been taken hostages is the violation of the basic pact between a country and its citizens. So this is one thing that most Israelis are very troubled by. And the fact that we needed, an American president to rescue one of the hostages because the government does not care is something that is infuriating to many Israelis. Now, of course, we are so grateful that Eden Alexander is back. Any hostages that is back is something that is just so, watching him reunited with his family yesterday really brought tears to my eyes, and, to many Israelis and to many Jews abroad, because this is the first thing that we should do. But the fact that we have to rely on the American president because he cares more about the hostages than our prime minister is something that we cannot understand, we cannot grasp, and we cannot, accept it, because we have to say again and again to our government, you have to bring all of them back. This is our responsibility, and Israeli society is not going to heal, is not going to start the healing process from the trauma that we are still living following October 7th until all of the hostages are back. We still have now, unfortunately, apparently 20 hostages who are still alive, but they are suffering as we speak. And again, we have a huge majority of Israelis that say we have to bring them back no matter the price. Unfortunately, the government just doesn't care, and Netanyahu is more obsessed with what his coalition parties think, and they want to continue the war in Gaza. So it seems that we have to rely on the American president to put pressure on Netanyahu to, bring this terrible, terrible issue to a close and bring all of the hostages back to their families. Of course, we have also to think that, we need a ceasefire, because the war now does not seem to further any goals for Israeli society, only the political survival of this government. The fact that the government does not pose any viable plan for what's going to happen in Gaza, who is going to control Gaza if Hamas is ousted. Netanyahu doesn't care about this, does not talk about this, and we also rely on, on outer sources to try to bring about a better future. And I think this is something that is very disappointing and tragic. And most Israelis have been, on the one hand, exhilarated by seeing Eden Alexander back, but on the other hand, very worried about what about, the other 58 hostages? What about them? Who's going to take care of them?
Sure. And how do you see this trip of the American president Donald Trump to the Middle East without stopping in Israel? I mean, is he isolating Netanyahu, so to speak, or is it a way to put pressure on the Israeli government? What's going on?
So it's very hard to say what's going on inside Trump's head. I think he's a very, very unpredictable person. But it seems that the American administration understand that they can't trust Netanyahu to try to build a better, future for the Middle East. And so it's a clear message of distrust by the American administration toward the Israeli government and toward Netanyahu. And this is, of course, very troubling. I hope that somehow, there will be a plan to end the war, to bring the hostages back, and to create a regime in Gaza that, of course, does not foster terror, but try to build a better future for, the Palestinians who are living there, and that Trump would pressure Netanyahu to agree to this new new plan. I really, really hope this is the way we're going to go to. A lot of Israelis now hope that there is a momentum to bring the hostages back. We have been protesting since October of 23. Every week, every Shabbat, we are holding, the Reform Movement are holding Havdalah ceremonies at the end of Shabbat at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv and also in Jerusalem, calling for the release of the hostages. We are praying for this for so long, and we must, bring this saga to an end. We must bring all of them back. So we really hope that now there is a momentum that is actually going to be realized.
Tell us a little bit about the Israel Religious Action Center, IRAC.
I'm sorry, there is a siren. I have to go down. There is a siren. So
okay, no problem, Orly. Thank you so much.
Thank
really.
You.
So it was awesome talking to you. Go. Please go. Foi a nossa conversa com a Orly Erez-Likhovski, ao vivo. Vocês viram que acontece com uma pessoa em Israel, eventualmente, a gente espera que fique tudo bem. Ela mora, pelo que eu sei, não muito longe de Jerusalém, e acho que foi uma ótima oportunidade para alguém que está do lado progressista, a favor da conversa, afinal de contas, e contra o racismo, de contar para a gente como é que é essa perspectiva e esse evento que aconteceu em Hanan. A gente falou a respeito dele aqui, nos nossos programas aqui no IB. Isso aconteceu, como eu disse, na véspera de Yom HaZikaron, o dia em memória aos soldados caídos e vítimas de terrorismo, e ela vem promovendo um trabalho muito interessante. Tem, inclusive, para quem tiver interesse, um podcast chamado The Pluralist, esse é um trava-língua para mim essa palavra, o pluralista, né, The Pluralist Podcast, vai virar meme isso, gente. Enfim, que ela entrevista, pelo menos nas 2 primeiras edições, rabinos. Uma rabina foi a primeira entrevistada, depois um rabino reformista, e vale a pena aí escutar essas conversas, estão nos principais tocadores aí de podcast. Dito isso, pessoal, eu me despeço, faço aquele convite que a gente costuma fazer a vocês de assinar, né, o nosso clube de membros, entrar para o nosso clube de membros, R$14,99 por mês, não é caro, enfim, e a partir dele você tem acesso a uma série de conteúdos exclusivos, têm sido produzidos pelo João Torquato, pelo João Miragaia, e daqui a pouco vai ter coisa minha também, enfim, então vai ser um prazer se vocês fizerem isso, de modo que o IB continue produzindo conteúdo relevante, trazendo pessoas diversas para conversar, a exemplo da Orly. É isso, pessoal. Olha, foram os roots, está chegando aqui a informação para mim, a Anita Efraim, oh meu Deus, fiquei aqui enrolada. Anita Efraim, que toca aqui a nossa comunicação, acabou de me mandar mensagem a respeito do que está acontecendo, então vamos ver se daqui a pouco a gente tem mais informações, mas de qualquer forma, como vocês sabem, quando toca a sirene é preciso ir para um quarto seguro e é preciso esperar um pouquinho. Então, acho que a gente não vai ter oportunidade de continuar a nossa entrevista hoje, mas quem sabe de uma próxima ocasião. É isso, pessoal, me despeço e até a próxima. Amanhã tem Notícias da Guerra. Nessa quarta-feira, 11 horas da manhã, Henrique está de volta. A gente parou uma semaninha porque ele estava com a agenda realmente apertada numa viagem por Argentina, Uruguai, e amanhã, inclusive, ele vai falar disso e de tudo que está acontecendo. É claro que ele vai falar do Papa também, obviamente, porque já tem contatos lá no Vaticano, ele que era tão amigo do, enfim, Papa Francisco, e agora vai contar para nós qual é a visão que ele tem a respeito do Leão XIV. É isso, pessoal, até amanhã, e muito obrigada.